Dave is a survivor of a life-threatening battle with addiction and celebrated 10 years clean and sober as a spiritually reborn warrior for God in June of 2017. Dave is a surfer, a writer, and a songwriter, and has God lead his way in all of his pursuits in life and business. He lives in Encinitas and has created his life and business around his love for surfing, which he does every morning soon after waking. The name of this talk, which I'm so excited and intrigued about, is Why I Call It God. Please welcome with me, Dave
Kehnast.
Kehnast! I definitely know that.
Yeah, now I'm getting all nervous. I'm usually not nervous to speak in front of people. So, the name of the talk, the reason I call it God, it came from that I sent that email to Sarah Ann here last week, and she replied to me. I had actually appeared on I had an interview on a woman's podcast, and she's got a Catholic-based podcast called Cultivating a Rich Interior. And I really wanted to be on the podcast because there's something fascinating about the Catholic faith for me. One of my favorite things for me to do in Chicago was to ride my bicycle around the city and then stop off and go into these beautiful cathedrals that are all over the place and just sit and pray and kneel in front of Mary and then kneel in front of Jesus. And there's this beautiful mysticism that permeates the Catholic faith. And aside from all of the, the wacky stuff associated, there's this really beautiful foundation to Catholicism. And so I just forwarded the email to Sarah, the same one that I sent to this other woman. And Sarah responded or called me up or sent me an email and said, I have some feedback. You might not want to use that word God. And I said, well, why not? And this is what I call it. She said, well, there's the conscious community and there might be some Buddhists there and they might, yada, yada, yada. And so I immediately got all pissed off and I called her on the phone and I had this sort of heated conversation with her. And my ego got all up in it and I started, doing that thing that I do when I get confronted. And so I went surfing soon thereafter and had this beautiful, most amazing epic session over at Swami's on Saturday afternoon. And as I was sitting out there just in that meditative state waiting, it just came to me like, why don't you just discuss the reason why you call it God and that personal reason for you? Because it's unfortunate that I'm always having to, when I call it God, that I immediately have to follow it with that, oh, don't worry, I'm not religious. Oh, don't worry, I don't believe God is Jesus is the only one. Or don't worry, I think that they're all the same. It's really unfortunate that I have to put that disclaimer in there. And it's unfortunate that when I use the word God with a Christian and then they bring up the Jesus thing, that I have to feel like I tell them, well, I don't think Jesus is the only forgotten son of, God and all that. And it just kind of perverts the message, it perverts the word, and there's just the truth. The truth was handed down through these various spiritual avatars, and then the truth was perverted by the words of man. And those are the world's major religions. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them. But I want to talk about how I came to discover this thing called God, or how this thing called God came to discover me. Now, I'm a little reluctant to discuss my addiction background. It's not what I do for a living. I don't work with addicts. I certainly do that work for free at service work. I have to give away what was given to me so that I can keep what I have. But I'm going to. So, my life was a freaking shitstorm. I'm living proof that miracles are real and that anything is possible. I should not be alive. It's only by the grace of what I choose to call God that I'm not sitting in a prison cell right now. The depths of the places that addiction took me, I couldn't categorize as anything shy of disgusting. I did things that I never thought that I would, or that I could, or that existed inside of me, and I did things that I was that I was taught were bad. And there's this one night, this is a day in the life of me. There was this one night I needed some heroin and I didn't have any. And I was sitting in my parents' basement and plotting and scheming and drinking this cheap wine and needing. Nobody knows the word need more than a freaking addict, So I concocted a scheme, and the scheme was I'd go to the White Hen Pantry and I'd get a carton of cigarettes on this credit card. And I'd take the carton of cigarettes down to the west side of Chicago and I'd find some little gangbanger and I'd trade him cigarettes, see if he'd trade cigarettes for heroin. So I did that. I got the carton and I drove down to the west side and I saw this kid. And I said, yo, man, we can do a trade? And he said, sure, man, take a right and then take a left and then take a right. And so he's directing me away from the Eisenhower Expressway, the main thoroughfare in Chicago, right, to the western suburbs. All of a sudden I'm away from the highway and I'm in the hood. You know, this is not a place where I'm supposed to be or where I'm welcome and where I don't fit in. And I backed up this alley, went past the alley, and I backed into the alley, and I'm waiting for him to bring me the package. And I got the cigarettes, and he comes and he brings me 2 packages, and I give him 5 packs of cigarettes, and I opened it and I sniffed it, and I could tell it was good. I just knew. And I said, all right, you go get me 2 more, and I'll give you the packet of cigarettes. He says, all right. He disappears. And it's starting to kind of hit me. I'm like getting excited. I'm not feeling terrible anymore. I'm starting to like feel positive about life because that's what happens. And all of a sudden I look up and I'm surrounded by like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 young black teenagers. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning on the west side of Chicago. And this is like not a place I should be. And they surrounded my car, and one of them says, yo man, give up the Newports. And I was being real chill and lackadaisical with them, not respecting them. Right? And I kind of leaned over, I go, hold on a second, man. I reach over, and this kid punches me as hard as he could through the window of my car. And in this instant, I realized that my life was in danger, and I floored it. I went plowing through them. And as they're chasing me, my car immediately runs out of gas. So I get out of my car, and I'm running as fast as I could to get to the Eisenhower Expressway. It's like 2 or 3 blocks away, and I'm just on autopilot, and I see this chain link fence, and I hurdle the chain link fence, and I roll down this embankment, and I land on the side of the Eisenhower Expressway in this like pile of like broken glass and rubber and gasoline and piss and whatever else, and I just start running. And so I'm running, and this car all of a sudden pulls up next to me, and this dude rolls his window down, and he goes, yo man, get in. And I was like, all right. So I get in the car with this other African-American fellow, and I tell him what happened. He says, don't worry, dog, you're with me. So we go back into the west side, and I tell him I got a credit card. He goes, where's school to fill up? So we went around filling people's cars up with gas all night, and they gave us cash, and we took the cash and went and bought drugs. And the sun came up over the west side of Chicago. We actually met this hooker, and we go back to her house, and then he's trying to like pimp the hooker out to me, and like this. My point in telling the story is not to glorify drugs, although it's a kind of a hilarious story. These kids could have freaking killed me. That's what they do when they catch these people. They beat them within inches of their life, and they leave them for dead. And the story is, again, not to glorify drug use. There's nothing glorious about this. When I really think about it, it puts trauma into the heart of my soul. This is a terrifying thing I went through, right? 6 weeks later, I was arrested for possession on the west side of Chicago, and all of a sudden, this is me, this skinny little white kid from the suburbs is facing prison. I'm not supposed to go to prison. It was never in the cards. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Until June 6, 2007, when my mother called in the family room and she said, why don't you call that treatment center? And for whatever reason, I weighed my options in that moment, and I said, okay. And that began my path to recovery. I spent 124 days in treatment. I actually got out of treatment 10 years ago, October 18th of 2007, so it's been 10 years. Why I call it God, the reason I call it God. So this thing, he, she, it, the universe, the permeating energy that, makes up the fabric of the universe, it put me through what it did so that I could be alive to tell the stories that I have. Tell the stories of what I've been through. And so I'm sitting there in rehab, and it's about 2.5, 3, maybe about 6 weeks in. And I'm starting to listen to these 12-step people. I'm like, maybe these guys are right because my life is not working, and maybe I should just get over my fucking self, right? So I started to listen, and the door of willingness opened that much, right? So it's nap time one day. It's nap time at rehab. And I'm 32 years old, and I gotta take a nap before dinner. And rehab sucks. Don't ever go to rehab. Avoid rehab at all costs, but I'm supposed to have my head down, and it's not down. I'm reading this book. I pick up a book by Stephen Hawking called A Brief History of Time, right? And I actually looked up the clause today. So I'm reading, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I come to this part in the book. It says, as explained before, this means that one might as well cut the Big Bang and any events before it out of the theory because they can have no effect on what we observe. Space-time would have a boundary, a beginning at the Big Bang. Science seems to have uncovered a set of laws that, within the limits set by the uncertainty principle, tell us how the universe will develop with time if we know its state at any one time. These laws may have originally been decreed by God. And at that very minute, The sky opened up, a white light appeared, it was like a burning bush. I have a song about it called the God Song, and the chorus goes, it came shining through dusty blinds in a dim-lit room, and I saw the light, and I saw the light. And I could see the light permeating and the little dust particles filling the air, and tears flew out of my eyes. And I hit my knees and I said, wherever the hell you are, I am yours forever. And my soul was permanently healed in that moment. And I got out of treatment. I think I went to literally 1,000 AA meetings my first year of sobriety. It was the only thing there was for me to do. It was the only thing that mattered. So the reason I call it God is because God is the word that it used when it introduced itself to me in the pages of this book. God became everything. It became all that there was. I was surrounded in this light, and I was spiritually reborn in an instant. And arguing the existence or the non-existence of that thing that is essentially nameless is not even something that I do, except when my ego gets triggered by Sarah. I mean, it's the name is one thing I will argue because the name is personal to me, but the existence of it's not an argument I'm interested in having. You can be an agnostic or an atheist, and I don't care. I'm not going to engage with you on a level regarding who's right or who's wrong there. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to that thing that I choose to call God. So thank you all very much for listening.